Going live. Well, good afternoon. It's Grant Cameron again. And we're going to do another update today with my partner, my associate, Desta Barnaby. And we've got another little couple things we want to talk about today. Hopefully we've got the video and the audio all sorted out. I want to first do a little bit of update on what we did yesterday. We were talking about different ways of sort of disassociating and getting a download. And there's a couple that I sort of left out. I left out yoga, which is a method that people use. And the main one that's used in the Western Christian religion is prayer. I left out prayer. A lot of people use prayer to create dissociation. And I got someone who reminded me about strong emotion, which is true. And that sort of links into fear, trauma, all this kind of stuff. That strong emotion is part of it. And it's also probably interesting because you get situations where people get one-time telepathic messages, and usually they'll get it like when they're dreaming or when they're sort of in a sort of a very quiet state, and there's a very traumatic event happens. Someone dies, there's a car accident or something, and it's almost like there's a signal that's sent out, and because your mind is quiet, you sort of pick up this signal. And so one of the questions that we had a question that came in about downloads. So Desta, can you tell me what that question about downloads, and we'll go with that.
Yep. Someone named Imogen Rex said, I want a mental download. Grant, any tips?
Okay, so we talked about the different methods yesterday, and I actually started using my little thing. This is they're called the Muse. It's there's a lot of these brain enhancement technologies around. I actually started using this last night because I had an older phone. I got a new phone that now I can actually load the app. And this thing actually is the one, if you've seen it on the internet, where you can actually make blocks disappear, and you can, with your mind, you can make these blocks spin or disappear on the screen and stuff like that. And it's used for meditation. So the way it works is you put this thing on, and basically it will monitor your brain. And I was using it last night. And what happens is that when your mind is quiet, it's very quiet. And if it gets really, really quiet, you'll hear little birds chirping. And when your mind starts to trail, suddenly you'll hear wind and rain and stuff like that. And you know your mind is wandering, and you bring it back. And actually, the first time I was not very good at it. Second time I actually got pretty good. So I'm starting to work on this now. So these are the kind of brain things that people can use to quiet the mind. Now, usually that's going to be a very slow process that'll take you years of meditation in order to develop a samadhi experience or some sort of experience where you're getting what would be called a download. The only way I know for sure to do it, guaranteed, and that is the use of DMT, high dose, not just LSD, but high dose LSD and high dose psilocybin. The problem with that sort of stuff is that it's sort of out of control. You really can't really tell what's going to happen. It's sort of like you're there. And there's a really sort of a funny story that was told about this, is you sort of think that this is going to be something you can control, something that'll be very, very interesting. And if you want to see how this actually works, the famous expression was done by Sting, who was with the band The Police. And Sting got into the spiritual stuff, and he went down to Brazil, and he wanted to do the ayahuasca thing. And Sting has a famous expression. He said, if you think this is a recreational drug, think again. And if you go on Google and you type in Sting and you put ayahuasca, you'll come up against a video where he talks about his experience with ayahuasca, which was it's actually pretty humorous, where he's talking about the fact that he's there, and the shaman looks at him and he says, there's a group, and Sting is in the group, and he goes, which guy is Sting? And then Sting puts up his fingers, that would be me. And then he says, we got special brew for you. And he gets this big, huge glass. Everybody else gets a smaller glass. And Sting describes this, and he says he was begging this guy, just kill me, do something, get rid of me. I mean, he was just devastated by what had happened to him. He just had lost control. So that's the whole thing. You are, and the way I describe download is, it's a situation where you learn something you didn't have before. So it's not like you're going to get a mathematical formula or something, but the way you see the world after these kind of experiences is going to be completely different. You're going to see it completely different. So I would say that would be the only way for the download is you got to be prepared that it's maybe not what you think it is. It's going to, you got to be prepared for it, especially with the ayahuasca. They'll talk about it's not just the drug. You have to have the set, what they call the set and setting. So you have to have the shaman or somebody who knows what they're doing is in that, and they do the prayer, and they do the all the drumming and all this kind of stuff that they do. That makes it much more effective. Sometimes it's not just the drug. So that's the one thing I want to update on yesterday, and we will probably write these things out, like yesterday's thing, this whole session about the different methods. And again, people who have methods that they want to put in can send in their methods, their questions, stuff like that. And I want to do a little update before we get to what I'm going to do today. Tomorrow, I've talked to Des. We're going to do a live broadcast tomorrow, and hopefully it goes well, because we're going to be on scene. We're going to be doing it from the University of Manitoba, and this is where I spent almost my entire life. And we got a very interesting. There's three particular spots I want to show you on the campus. Have little interesting stories, and especially we're going to go to the archives. And there was earlier this year, one of the, I guess, top remote viewers, would you call that, Desta? One of the top remote viewers in the country. Actually, we did an interview with Richard Dolan's wife, Tracy. And if you go back and look, it's on my Whitehouse UFO YouTube channel. Tracy and I were talking about right brain, left brain, about this whole thing of disassociating, and she knew it because she'd been in this world. She knew how this sort of game played. And we got contacted by this sort of a key remote viewer who is working with one of the people who used to run the remote viewing program in the US in the 1970s. And she was donating 4,000 pages of papers to the University of Manitoba archives. And I went, wow, why would you put it there? And so we went there, and they actually have the biggest spiritualist collection in the world, or maybe it's a very big spiritualist collection. Yeah, there was a very famous spiritualist in Winnipeg in the early 20th century, and they have 50 collections of spiritual material. And that's why she was putting this 4,000 pages of remote viewing targets that she'd done over, 8 years or something like that. It was quite a few years she had done targets where she was doing this, looking into the future on these particular Associated Press pictures that were in the newspaper. So she came, we met her, we actually interviewed, who was the guy we interviewed from the Roy Stemmen from did all the psychic magazines and stuff. We did him. So we're going to go there, or we're going to show you that collection. And it's very interesting. So we're going to do that update. And then Saturday, provided this works, because I'm not a technology guy, we are going to do a field trip to Gaia. I am going to Gaia on Saturday. I'm going to do an interview with George Norrie on Sunday at Gaia. You hear lots of stories about Gaia, lots of rumored stories. I've been to Gaia. Desta's been to Gaia. I've actually been to Gaia a couple of times. And so we're going to lead you through it. We're going to start at the airport in Winnipeg, and then we're going to fly into Denver. And I have told the people that are picking me up, you get picked up in a limousine. I'm going to say, give me half an hour. Don't come for half an hour. We're going to go to the Denver airport. There's lots of stories about the Denver airport, and I'm going to be in the Denver airport, and we are going to film inside the Denver airport. And I'm going to show you the horse, the famous horse that killed the guy who built it. This horse that sits outside the thing. We're going to go through all the rumors about Denver airport. And then hopefully, if it all works out, you will actually see, we will be filming as we go into Gaia. And this is a huge campus. Gaia is not one building. It's a huge campus outside of Boulder, Colorado. We'll be in the limousine, and you'll be able to actually see what Gaia actually looks like, what's in the inside. Whether they'll let me film inside Gaia with the makeup and all this stuff they do there, we'll see. But that's sort of an update. Now, we're going to do a little bit of a longer question today. And then what we're going to do is we're going to shut down the live broadcast, And then Desta and I are going to do a filmed one where we're going to take questions, short questions. We're going to do a whole series of them, and we're going to film it, and we're going to put it on the website. So my website was always presidentialufo.com, but Desta, thanks to Desta and other people have actually rebuilt the website. And the new website address is Beyond Presidential UFO. And so we're going to put that video on the website. And this will be a video. We're going to do some short questions in a tape session so that this one doesn't run on too long. So we're going to go for maybe less than an hour. Then we're going to do this live one we're going to put on the website. So we have 2 questions that I want to work off today. And the first one has to do with the Atom Project. And people know that the To the Stars Academy has started a new project called Atom, and it stands for Acquisition and Data Analysis of Materials. So what I've done, and this will appear on the website probably later today or tomorrow, I've actually done a PowerPoint presentation on metals. So I'll talk about the Atom Project. I'll talk about what I think they're doing. And I will actually talk about some of the stuff behind the scenes, because I've been in this for 43 years. I've handled some pieces that people say are crash saucer material. And I will go into that whole thing about what I know about metals. And I'll actually tell a bizarre story about Uri Geller and John Lennon dealing with metals. So that will be up. And that was a question, somebody who asked that question about
Steve Snedden.
Yeah, Steve. So Steve wanted to know about the Atom project. So I have a PowerPoint presentation. It's not very long, maybe 20 minutes. I have Linda Howe talking about the metal, about this layered piece of metal. We actually interviewed her in Eureka Springs. She talks about the metal. You'll see that. You'll hear about the metal that was recovered by this government official that I knew. I had taken a woman in there and blindfolded her to this site. And it was actually my friend that told everybody where the site was. So we're going to do that. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to do an answer to a question about the alien agenda. So let's give that question, and then I'll go through that.
So Diane Baker asks, I want to know what you think the alien agenda is, realizing that there is likely more than one type of alien.
Okay. I have thought about this from the 2 days after I had my first sighting, is when I first started to think about this whole issue. Now, because everybody likes to use acronyms, like now you have this, To the Stars is using the Atom acronym, and I hate acronyms. I hate it. I mean, why can't people just call it what it is? So people, especially in the scientific community, like use acronyms. So I'm using my own acronym. So I'm calling this the TOW project, the TTOW project, and it's the theory of wow. And this is a theory I started to develop, and as it's gone along, I've never really talked about it. The odd time I'll say it's all signaling. You'll hear me say, I think it's all signaling. That's all what they're doing is signaling. And the more I look at what's going on, the more I think this might actually be what's going on. Where it starts for me is 1975. And as I've told the story 100 times, I have no interest in UFOs. The only reason I'm going out there is because everybody's seeing this thing. We don't know what this thing looks like. We just say it. We just know that people are seeing this thing. We go out there, and the first night, we're looking around. What's everybody looking at? We can't figure out what everybody's looking at. We're about to go home. This thing appears from the left to the right, down low in front of the car, in close. This is not a light in the sky. And I always talk about this thing about belief and knowing. And there was nobody in the car who then said, I wonder if that's what they're looking at. Is that what it was? Everybody just went, there it is. And that's the idea of wow. It was like, wow, there it is. Everybody knew instinctively this was Charlie Red Star. We'd heard about this Charlie Red Star, and it was like, this is it. We can see it. So 2 nights later, I remember I took all my friends out there, and after an hour, they all went home. And there was still a bunch of cars there that remained, or 2 cars and about 9 or 10 people that remained. I remember the second night, it came again. It was the same thing. It came right at us the second night. And it came in fairly close, down low, and then it made this turn. And I remember like it was yesterday. It made this turn and went off into the northeast. And I stood there, and I was just looking at it. And I can still remember to this day, the first thing that came into my mind is, wow, that may actually be an extraterrestrial spacecraft from some other planet. I was just, wow. And then the second thing that popped into my mind, I can still remember clearly, is like, but what are they doing? Because it was just like the first night, it was the same thing. It was sort of flying along in front of the car and it just flew off into the distance. And the second night, when it made the turn, it went off in the northeast. It was the same thing. It was like, it didn't seem to be doing it. It was just flying along. And so we watched it until it disappeared up into the horizon. And I came to wonder, like, so what are they doing? Like, what's this all about? And there was actually a joke in Carmen where the experiences were taking place, where people said it was called the beer run. They said, oh, the thing's going on a beer run. It's going down to pick up beer, and they'll be coming back about midnight and taking the beer back. And it was the same thing. It was like they weren't picking up anybody. They weren't doing anything. They were just flying along. And so I always wondered, what are the aliens actually doing? What is the agenda? Now, most people are stuck in the first part before I saw the thing. And I have empathy for people who don't understand what's going on, because unless you see something up close, you will always wonder. It's like same thing with me. It's like someone say, I saw a ghost, I had a download experience, and I'll say, yeah, and I'll believe it, but I'll still say, well, I really don't know. You don't know for sure unless you have the experience. So most people in the UFO community, like same thing. You have the people who are doing the sighting stuff. We're trying to get the sightings. We're trying to prove this is for real. We have the Atom Project. We get this metal. We're trying to prove this. This will prove it's for real. We have the experiencer thing. If they have this DNA marker, if they have a different DNA, this will prove they're special. And everybody's always trying to prove that the phenomenon is real. I had the advantage. I knew right from the word go, the phenomenon was real. I had no question about whether this phenomenon is real. And so I got past that. So when people come to me and say, oh, let's go for a skywatch. Let's go after every conference has a skywatch. And I go, nah, I don't think I want to go. Because it's always the same thing. People are looking at a light in the sky and they're arguing about whether there's a star or a planet. And it's like, oh, come on, I'm going to bed. This is nonsense. Because I already know. I don't need to be proved that this thing's for real. So my thing was always the idea that, okay, it's for real. Now, what are they doing here? And that's why I went after the government. I figured the government must know what they're doing. And I was always interested in what's actually going on. Why are these people here? And that's why I call it the theory of wow, because that's how it started for me. And if you look through it, that may be what they're doing. They're playing, and it's the same thing. It's like fishing. They're fishing. And there's actually a commercial. It's a beer commercial. And it's a very funny, and I don't have the rights to play it, but I could play it. And you can find this thing. I can't remember what American beer it is, but the aliens are throwing down these beer bottles, and people see the beer and they grab the beer bottle and they get pulled up, and the aliens are fishing for these people using beer bottles. And that's what I think they're doing. That's why I said it's messaging. And so I came up with this thing called the theory of wow, that all they want you to do is say, wow, that's all. And so that's how they got me. They pulled me in. Because after I saw the first one, I was caught the first night. As soon as I saw it, I was like, I fell off the edge of the earth. I couldn't believe what I was seeing because it was in fairly close, and there was no doubt this is something bizarre. And so I was caught with this wow thing. Now, you start looking at it that way, and you start seeing things that the intelligence is doing that fit into that same phenomenon. There was a case there, and I wrote this up in the book Charlie Red Star. There's a case of a bunch of kids. There were a place called Stevensfield Dam, which is just outside of Carmen. And this is in Manitoba, just north of the American border. And they were drinking. And there was like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. And when they went to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, they actually reported the fact that they had been drinking, that most of them were drunk. And this event happened. And what happened was they were sitting there on the sort of the wharf, and this object appeared. Charlie Red Star appeared. And it shot this beam of light down into the reservoir. And then this white object started to appear underneath the water. And it was just below the surface of the water. And of course, everybody started to freak out, and they're watching. And then the object started to come towards them. And it was coming in closer and closer and closer. It was just below the surface of the water. And one of the kids took a stone as it came in right close to the edge of the deck and threw it and hit this thing. And it broke into 5 pieces. And the 5 pieces just went like this, back in sort of a scattered pattern, back to where the beam was. It reassembled itself, and then it went back up, and the thing flew away. Now, that's a wow thing. So it's not like they're actually doing anything. It's not like, this is almost like it's a show. I mean, these kids, because when they went and they told the whole story, they went right to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in the middle of the night saying they were drinking and this event had happened. They were so floored by what they'd seen. And it was that kind of thing. It was like that wow event where they're not really doing anything. They're just doing this dramatic thing that gets your attention. And then it's like they get the thing and they wind these kids in and these kids are hooked. And you get these kind of experiences. And the prime example that sometimes I will use is the idea that you sort of think that things are happening the way they're happening. And when you look back on people's careers, you realize they got reeled in as well. And the prime example I use is Bud Hopkins. So Bud Hopkins, 1975, the same year I have my sighting, the same year Travis Walton is abducted, same year that a lot of stuff happened. Project Rama started just before in 74. This is a very critical period. So Bud Hopkins starts. And the way Bud Hopkins starts, most people don't know how he got involved. Bud Hopkins starts in 1975. He buys his liquor at the corner store, liquor store. He goes there, and the guy that runs the store says to him, "Hey, Bud, I had this weird thing happen. I saw this flying saucer land over by this apartment block the other night, and these aliens got out with little shovels, and they were digging holes in the ground." And Bud goes, "Really?" So Bud decides he's going to check it out. So what's the deal? Like, I mean, this doesn't happen anymore. Like, why would aliens get out and start digging in the ground with shovels or whatever they were digging with? And Bud went there to where this thing was. And sure enough, there was 15 holes, 5 inches deep that had been dug. And then he went to the hotel, or not the hotel, the apartment. And there was a night watchman there or something that would have seen, if this thing had landed, would have seen it. And he said to the guy, "Did you see something over in that field?" And the guy confirmed, said, "Yes, I saw this thing." So here again, you say, well, it's a random event, but just sort of got into it, whatever. And no, if you look at the theory of, wow, no, they wanted Bud in this thing. Almost like when I had my experience, I thought it was always a random experience. I always thought, oh, I just happened to be there in the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the right time. And then I realized that my event wasn't random. And I didn't realize it until 35 years later when I was doing the Charlie Red Star book, when I was redoing it. We'd done it in the 70s, nobody would publish it. I'm redoing it, and I revisited why I went out there. The sighting started in February of 1975, but I didn't go out. We said to my friend, let's go out, let's see what they're looking at. And we didn't go. And it wasn't for 3 months. I never would have gone if CKY TV here in Winnipeg had not filmed the thing jumping off the ground. And they filmed this thing jumping off the ground. And the guy that was filming it was not a cameraman. He was a film editor. He'd never shot a camera before in his life. And they had almost got it the night before. And he's looking through the viewfinder. I remember when he told me the story, and then 35 years later, it sort of rang a bell that this wasn't a random event. He said, "I'm looking through the viewfinder. This thing is 8.25 miles. We know exactly where the object was. We know where there was 10 people. There's a bunch of pilots. They'd surrounded this thing." And he said it was glowing up and it would glow back down, glow up. And he said, they didn't get anything the night before. I'm going to get something on camera. The next thing this thing starts to glow up, I'm going to shoot the trigger. And as soon as he pushes the trigger, the thing jumped up in the air. And then 35 years later, I'm going, that wasn't random. They were sitting, are you ready? Are you ready for this thing? And I almost started to think, maybe they wanted me out there. Maybe that's why they allowed this thing to happen. It's the only time I've ever heard that a UFO is captured on the ground where they actually filmed this thing jumping off the ground. And in 3 frames of film, it jumped to the bottom of the frame to the top of the frame, and it was 8 miles away, the camera. So then you see this thing. And then I look at Bud's and I go, that's not random. It's like they're dragging Bud in. And then when you start to look at Bud's story, you suddenly realize Bud had a UFO sighting in 1964. He's driving with some British people in his car, and the thing goes, it's daylight sighting, disc above the car, and it's just sitting there. And he's driving and he's looking up at this thing, and the thing is there for a couple of minutes, and it's just there, and all of a sudden it flies away or disappears or whatever. And Bud is hooked. He's got this experience. He goes back the next day. He redrives the place to see how long the thing had been there, all this sort of stuff. And then you realize not only that, but Bud, in the War of the Worlds in 1939 or 38, whenever this film, Bud was a 7-year-old kid. Bud was involved in the War of the Worlds. When this thing happened, his parents were listening to the thing on the radio. Bud is looking out the window. His parents were freaking out. The neighbor came with the guns and said, we're going to the hill. We're going to take these beings on or whatever. And the whole place was in pandemonium. And Bud's just shaking, and he's looking out the window as this little kid looking for the flying saucers as they're coming in to invade on the War of the Worlds thing. And you start to realize that No, this may be just wow. They just did this wow thing, and Bud got hooked the same as I got hooked. And that's all they want you to do is they want you to go, wow, they're raising consciousness. They're just getting people to talk about it, to think about it. They're not, because if they want us to know what they're doing, they could land on the White House lawn. They're doing this other process. They're not disclosing. They're not telling us what's actually going on. They're doing this weird little thing where they're making objects break into pieces and really weird things. So I had those events. The other event that I had that sort of sealed it for me, and yet I still didn't talk about this. I'm good friends with Chris Blatzel, who is this famous experiencer from North Carolina. I've known him since 2012. We met at a thing called The Gathering in Philadelphia. I actually talked to his wife more than him. Happened to go in 2013 to his house. I was going to drive right past his place. Really didn't know his story. It's just a weird experience that he had an experience where he's a high-level contactee. He's got a lot of stuff happening around him. Warner Brothers, the Hollywood company, wants to do his story. Mel Gibson wants to do it. The scriptwriters come to Chris and they say, we'd like a sign. We'd like a sign that we should do the movie. And Chris said, well, oh, okay. And he prays. I don't know what he did. Whatever. I'll see what I can do. And the next night, suddenly this famous tree starts burning in the backyard 3 times in 6 hours. And this is inside the tree. It's inside the tree. It's burning. The flames are coming out at the top, and there had been a UFO circle below there. Half the tree had died, all the branches. Just a really bizarre story. And then they're putting this fire out, and then a couple hours later, the tree would be on fire again, and they're filming it with an iPad. Just a very bizarre story. So Chris contacts back to Warner Brothers and says, you're never going to believe what happened last night. This tree, it started to burn. There was these bottle rockets shooting up from the bottom of the tree and stuff. And they said, thank you. That's the sign. That's the sign we want. So Warner Brothers is going to do this movie. Now, later, for whatever reason, they didn't go ahead with the movie, but that assured them. So I had gone to see this tree. I wanted to take this tree. I wanted to hear the story about his experience, because his first night experience had aliens all over the place chasing the truck. There was 5 witnesses. There was 14 UFOs. It was just the most bizarre story. And it takes place over a couple of hours. This just keeps happening over a couple of hours. So I went there and I'm talking to him. I take pictures. We do all this kind of stuff. And I'm sitting in his living room. And I've told the story a number of times. I'm about to go. I'm going to Florida. I'm going to leave and I'm coming back in a couple of days. I'm going to do a lecture. Coming back. So we're sitting there. We're playing Facebook in his living room. And all of a sudden I hear Chris say, what are you guys doing back in the room? And I look, and he's got 3 dogs. He's got a big black lab. He's got this medium-sized dog, and he's got this little chihuahua. And so these three dogs are sitting there looking at us. And he goes, how do you get back in the house? And we go to the front door, and the front door is wide open. He puts the dogs out, closes the door. I go, I don't know. The door got open. He shuts the door or whatever, puts the dogs out. I go to Florida a couple of minutes later. I get there, and he said, it happened twice more after you left. Back in the house. Suddenly the dogs are back in the house. The front door is wide open again. And then I went to the bathroom, put them outside, went to the bathroom. I came back out. The front door is wide open. The dogs are back in the house. And I went, whatever. You left the door open. It didn't impress me at all. So when I get back, and this is where this theory of wow comes from. So they're letting this is my impression now. They're letting the dogs out. And I really go, whatever. It doesn't mean anything to me. So I come back, and then the wow thing really happens. So I'm there. The car, I've got the rent-a-car. It's right beside the house. And luckily, for some reason, I had the camera on the front seat. And so I get out and we're talking. I take a couple more pictures of this burning tree thing. And we're standing on the back deck. And then he said, okay, let's go in the house. And Nellie, the black lab, was right behind us. And this is the story where we go in the house. The dog is on my left side. I'm here. Chris is here. We're going in the house. And all of a sudden, I hear Chris yell out, Nellie, what happened? And I look at the dog, and this blood is shooting at the dog's neck like an artery had been hit. And it's all on the walls and the floor. And it's just like, I'm going, wow. Like letting the dogs out, I wasn't impressed. But this was like, wow, get the camera. I go run into the car. And he's pulling the dog out by her leash. He's yelling at Chris, get me a knife. I got to cut off the leash. Get me a rag. And the girlfriend's on her hands and knees, and his blood's all over the place, whatever. And I'm going like, wow. And I'm sitting there photographing this. And we decide, we can't, they're probably going to die before I get to the vet or whatever. And Chris has got his hand, and the rag is all full of blood. And he lifts up the rag, and the dog gets up and just wags her tail, and she goes running off, and I chase her, and she goes to the front door, barks at the front door, and then takes off as if she's chasing something into the next yard. So almost like nothing had happened. And then later on, Chris and his father checked, and they could not find any wound on the dog's neck. But what happened next was, when we were talking about this, then I suddenly look at my pants, and my pants on the one side was completely covered with blood. And how long does it take a dog to run by you? Like a quarter of a second, half a second, whatever. And my whole pants, like the dog had been standing there for 5 minutes, blood up and down my pants. And then I said to Chris, why they did this? And he said, well, that was the shadow people. And I said, what do you mean the shadow people? And experiences will have these two-dimensional shadow people that move along the walls. So I said, nah, what did the shadow people do? And he said, well, they're evil. And we had this debate. And I said, no, I don't think it was shadow people. I think it was because they were letting the dog out the front, and I wasn't impressed. Like, they wanted this wow thing. I wasn't impressed. So they said, you aren't impressed with that? Watch this. And that's why the blood was on me. It was not Chris. It was all over me, all over my blue jeans, and a lot of blood. And I kept the blood. I was going to keep the pants because I got these famous pants now. And I was going to keep the pants. I washed them about a month later, and absolutely every piece of them dry. You cannot see. It was like there was no blood on them at all. So that was this thing of wow. And that's why I said to Chris, they want a movie. That's why they burned the tree. That's why they wanted this thing out there. They wanted this dramatic thing. They wanted this movie thing. And he said, I don't really know. And then later he contacts me. He said, Warner Brothers would like the photos. Can you send the photos that you took from the dog? So when they get this deal, whenever this thing happens in Hollywood, this is going to be one of the stories they're telling. And that's all they want. It's not like they're really doing anything. It's not like they're, taking anything from us or doing anything. They're just doing this. To me, it's always this wow thing. It's like this bizarre thing where I tell the story to you, I tell everybody. And a lot of people, even with the dog thing, they'll say to me, did that really happen? It's like, it's just so bizarre. It's just so bizarre. And I say, it happened exactly the way I'm telling you it happened. Or Chris will tell the story, and then people will come to me, and Chris is telling that story. That actually happened. Yeah, that actually happened. So it's that kind of thing. And then when you start looking at all the other events, then you start going through all the thing, and everything starts to make sense to me. People will always mention evil aliens because of cattle mutilations. And I always say, well, if you look at Perkins, a guy who was one of the crop circle guys, he said they all happen downwind and downstream from nuclear power activities, which to me is messaging. It's trying to send a message. So you may not know why it was there, but somebody in the government will know why that thing was there. And I always have this thing where I say, and I've said it to Linda and other people, I've said, why did they drop the cow? It doesn't make any sense. I can see if you're going to do, genetic stuff and you're building hybrids or whatever, you would take these things. But why do you come back and then drop the cow? I mean, not just put it back in somebody's yard where everybody can see it, but you drop it like from 100 feet where it drives the cow into the ground. Why would you do this? You've got the cow already. You don't have to come back and drop it off. Why are you dropping it off? And to me, it was always the same thing. It was like, because they want everybody to take photographs. They want people to look at this. They want it everywhere. They want everybody to tell the story because it has a background meaning. It's this wow thing. A couple weeks ago, John Alexander was on talking about the Skinwalker Ranch. And John was there, and they did this investigation, and they had cattle mutilations at the Skinwalker Ranch. And John wanted to tell the story about this cattle mutilation. It just blew him away. And this was the one where he said they had this cow that had been mutilated, but they had the heart. And inside the heart, they had pummelized the heart. Now, if you're doing genetic mutation or whatever they're doing or whatever, taking the fluids or whatever, why would you pummelize the heart? Why would you do this? They're doing it because they want you to go, as John did, wow, how I can't figure out how you could possibly do that. And they've done these kind of things where they take the heart out of the cow, and there's no exit wound. They can't figure out how did they get the heart out, or the brain. The brain is missing, and how did they get the brain out? And this is they're not doing, to me, it's like, no, they're not doing genetic stuff. They're doing wow thing. They're sending signals. They're saying, we want you to, they're reeling people in, and people are getting engaged. They're telling these stories, and all that's happening is consciousness is rising. People are going, something's going on here. Like, what's going on here? And they're waking us up to the fact that we aren't alone, that something's going on. There's higher realities. There's a higher consciousness, stuff like that. So you have those things. The same with the implants. I'm not 100% sure of this. I'd have to check this. But I talked to one of the people who had worked on implants, and he'd only worked on a couple. I said, were any of the implants the same, or were they all different? They were all different. And I would almost guess that all the implants are going to be different. So the question is this all different alien races that are doing it? Or is this some sort of thing where all they want, that maybe the implants aren't doing anything? Maybe they're just putting them in there because people are going to find them, and then they're going to, display this thing, because it doesn't make any sense. You would think that if it was the Greys or whoever's putting them in, that you would have two that are the same. And you don't have, I don't think there's two that are the same. The same was with the metal. So you have this ATIP is doing this program where not the ATIP, the To the Stars is doing this program where they're looking at the metals. So they're looking at implant. I know they have the implant stuff because Jacques Vallée is sort of the head of that program. So Jacques Vallée has got the implant stuff because Bigelow put up the money for that. They also got the what's it called, extruded metals. So this is the thing. It's the same thing. They've got that little thing and they're wheeling people in. Extruded metals is a story that maybe now people don't know in ufology, but I've been in this forever. And I know these stories happened in the past. The first one happened in 1947. So what you have is you have a UFO. So you have this craft comes across time and space and here, and then suddenly it's in trouble. And the person sees the craft, and the craft looks like it's going to crash. And everybody describes the same thing. This craft is there, and it's wobbling like it's going to crash, and people are freaking out, and the thing is there. And all of a sudden, another flying saucer will come in and try to, it's like it's fixing the other one. It stabilizes it, and then the thing stabilizes, and then it shoots out this molten metal. And on the ground, and then people, of course, are it's almost like the thing with the broken wing, with a bird that tries to get you away from the nest. It gets your attention, and that's so it gets the person's attention. Then it shoots this metal out, so the person will know, yeah, he's watching. The person grabs the metal, and for many years, over the last 80 years, people have got these what's called extruded metals, and there are about 20 of them. And Jacques Vallée did a lecture at Contact 2 years ago where he talks about these metals. I've got a screenshot of his lecture, and if you look at all those metals of all the different things, it appears to me they're all different. There are no two the same. And then so I started looking, because Tom DeLonge, they talked about this layered piece. Jacques and Putoff talked about it. So I contacted Linda. I said, Linda, you worked on Art's parts, the layered piece. I said, Tom's talking about this piece, many levels, and you said it was 36. He said it's 80. Is he talking about a different piece? And she said, no, I don't think so. I think it's the same piece. And so again, here you have the fact that there are no two pieces that are the same. And we've now heard other stories about metal that they've gone to get, because I've handled some pieces of metal. People have given me pieces, and I know that once they find out about it, they want to analyze this metal. So they're doing this thing, but they're doing this thing of proving that UFOs are real. There's this metal, it's got these weird isotopes. And so I started looking at this whole thing. Is this just a wow thing? Is this just a project in some foreign planet where they say, okay, we got to get these people attention. So here's what we'll do. This is a grade 6 project. You can get the grade 6 people to do this. Okay, we need a piece of metal. We're gonna have this UFO, and it's gonna pretend it's gonna crash, and it's gonna shoot this metal out. So we need you to make a weird piece of metal that we're gonna shoot out, and we're gonna give it to the natives on Earth here, and they're gonna pick up this piece of metal, and it's gonna give them the idea. They're gonna go, wow, and they're gonna all try to analyze this piece of metal, and they're gonna realize it didn't come from Earth. And in the old days, we couldn't, because they would take these extruded pieces of metal, and people would say, oh, it's just slag. It's just, you hoaxed it or whatever. But now we have the analysis. We can do the analysis. And so when you hear Jacques Vallée talk about it, the isotopes are all messed up. So you get the grade 6 project that won on Zeta Reticuli or whatever's. The project was that we're going to screw around with the isotopes, and we're going to throw that thing out, and the people on Earth will realize this is not from Earth. And they're going to go, wow, there's something going on here. And that's all it is. And so I said, maybe that's that project. Maybe the cattle mutilation is a grade 7 project, and we'll pummelize the heart, we'll pull the heart out, or we'll do whatever to get their attention. And then you get even down to the other thing, the grade 1 project. I was talking to Sid Goldberg. I say, Sid, I think the grade 1 project is lights. You put the lights on the craft. When I saw mine, it was a plasma object. It was like an intense plasma, or orange plasma thing. So you could say, okay, it was related to the propulsion, that when the craft powers up, that this light comes off the craft. Okay, you can say that. But then what do you say to John Lennon? John Lennon and May Pang, 1974, on this patio, on the condo up in the Dakota, this thing comes, and May Pang says this thing was there for 10 minutes. She's madly trying to take photographs and can't get a photograph. She gets all the photographs. They're all blanked out. They're all messed up, whatever. So why would they not allow her to photograph? They wanted to see. And what she describes, and John drew, is this flying saucer with these these sort of bulbs, these white bulbs around the whole thing, and a red light on the top. And the question is, do you really, in order to go through time and space, do you really need little white light bulbs around the outside of the craft? And why are all UFOs different? So that's a grade 1 project. Let's put lights on the craft. Why do UFOs have lights on them? They have lights so you can see them. When you see a UFO, they want you to see it. That's the whole thing. Because when they abduct people and do that kind of stuff, nobody sees anything. So when they want to cloak themselves, they can cloak themselves, which would mean when I saw a UFO, when Bud Hopkins saw a UFO, when John Lennon saw a UFO, that was not a random event. They wanted these people to see it. It's a wow thing. John Lennon want to go, wow. Hopkins goes, wow. I go, wow. And you start telling the story. And the more you tell the story, the more it becomes acceptable that this is actually going on, and the consciousness starts to rise. So you have this whole thing, especially the lights, because our planes don't have lights on it. So why have they got lights? I had one case in 1976 that happened. I talked to the guy in 76. It happened in 72 here in Manitoba. And this is the guy, and I still remember this. This is a story where the thing lands. He's with his girlfriend. They pull into the field, and he actually walks up to the craft. He's looking for the door, and he actually walks around the craft and gets in behind the craft. So his girlfriend is now on the other side of the craft, and he's looking for, he can't find a door. And the way he described was John Lennon had the white lights. This had yellow lights around the edge of the craft, and it had an antenna with a light on the top. And I'm thinking, even back then, I realized something's wrong with this story. Why would a UFO have an antenna? And there's a couple of stories where the UFO has an antenna on it. It's almost like they want you to draw this. All UFOs look different. They're just doing the wow thing. They're just trying to sort of impress you. Same with crop circles. I mean, all crop circles are different, and they get more and more complex. So you get these things, and even with Colin Andrews, told the story in the early days when they're flying, and they would see this formation and then this formation. And he says to, I think it was Busty Taylor, he said, Busty, wouldn't it be interesting if they put these together, and the very next day they fly over, and the objects, the two are put together in a crop circle. So what are crop circles? They may have some sort of message in them, but they're just to make people go, wow. And they do, because you have actual picture books where people, like coffee table books with these people, and everybody does the same thing. They don't really know what it's about. They just go, I don't know what it is, but man, look at that. Wow. And they're just turning the pages, and it's this signaling thing. It's just this thing where they're sort of raising consciousness, and you get even the pattern of ufology. I've been in it so long, and I tell people, you've got to realize this. There is a pattern. UFOs, the way they look now, they didn't look that way. 1890, they were wooden ships with guys hanging off of ropes with propellers on them. These are the flying around the United States. These were the UFOs of that generation. And then it moves from the wooden ships to Foo Fighters. And the Foo Fighters, my father's boss was in World War II. My father was a pilot. These things would hang off the edges of planes, off the German planes and the Allied planes. And on the edges of the plane, they were called the Foo Fighters. But it was a completely different thing than wooden ships. It was like totally different. And then those things went away. They were no longer on the edges of planes. Then suddenly there were the green fireballs of the 1940s, and they were hanging over nuclear power plants and where they were building processing plutonium and building the atomic bombs and stuff like that. These green fireball things were above those things. And then they go away, they disappear, they don't come back. And then suddenly you get the Adamski crafts that have the balls under them. And then you have the flying saucers come along. Now you have triangles. And it's like the crafts, it's like, okay, let's give them a different one. They're getting tired of the triangles. Let's give them a different type of thing. And they present a new type of craft. And it's like if it was a one particular race coming, then you would assume that the crafts would all look the same. And that's the other thing, is that almost every case that I've always wondered, to me, is I don't think I've ever seen a case where somebody says, I'm dealing with this particular race, and that's all I've seen. You always get all the rest. So you get Travis Walton, he sees the gray type beings, and then suddenly there's a humanoid in there. And you see this thing as if they're all working together. Suddenly the reptilians, they have an experience with the reptilians, you have this experience, almost like all these things. And if you look at how many different beings there are, you have a situation where the guy who did the humanoid project, I talked to him about how many are there actually, and he analyzed all the humanoid sightings. He said it's got to be over 1,000 different types of beings. And yet when you look at the beings, you start talking to the people, and I know Destiny, you and I have talked to Nancy Tremaine mentioned this, and so did Sherry Wild. Sherry Wild actually said to the alien, do you actually look like that? Are you actually an alien? He said, no, it's not. It's like a screen image. No, we don't actually look like this. We just came as this thing. And she said, well, why do you come as this ugly gray thing? And he goes, ugly gray thing? Do you ever look at yourself in the mirror? He said, you got those big white teeth. Every time you smile, we think you're going to eat us. And this is this whole thing. And a number of experiencers have actually asked the alien, are you an alien? And they'll say, no, we're not. And you really don't need to know what we look like or whatever, almost like they're doing the screen imaging thing. So when you start, the more you look into ufology, and that's what Jacques Vallée said, I'd be very surprised if this turned out to be extraterrestrials. It starts to look almost like it's much more sort of pliable, that it's some sort of higher thing that's screen imaging. And you get all these different patterns, or the Phoenix lights. You get the Phoenix lights. The craft, people describe this thing being 1 mile or 2 miles across. Now, do the aliens actually need a craft that's 2 miles across? And do you need to fly it 100 feet over the ground in Phoenix, Arizona? No, they're basically making people go, wow, they're flying this thing over, this massive craft, to get everybody's attention, to get the publicity. And the final example I'll use is, we do the musician thing. And Desta and I have worked on these books with music. And a lot of musicians have UFO experiences. And the one that amazed me the most was a guy named Patrick Moraz. Now, the Moody Blues was a band that had been abducted in 1967, very famous band, going from Manchester into London. And one of the band members had left, and Patrick Moraz had taken over. So you have these guys who already got this UFO background, and then Patrick Moraz comes into the band, and Patrick Moraz makes these people look normal. I mean, when I heard his story, and this is kind of a weird thing with musicians, is that a lot of musicians don't see one UFO. Like Billy Ray Cyrus saw 6 coming over the thing. Keisha saw a whole fleet of them. There's a bunch of them. And Patrick Moraz has the biggest one. 1973, he's in Brazil. They've got a studio up on the side of a mountain. They're in the middle of the morning. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. They take a break. He comes out, and he's just standing there and overcoming the UFOs. And what he described was a fleet of red UFOs. He said it was like a freeway, thousands of UFOs going over in a long string as he's standing outside. So you get that kind of stuff. I mean, do you really need that many crafts? Are they actually going somewhere to pick up beer or whatever they're doing? Or is this all screen imaging? So what I say in the end, the more I look at it, and I may be wrong, the more I look at it, the more this looks like just screen imaging. It's imaging. It's trying to raise your consciousness. It's trying to make you to think or whatever. It's all sort of like the SOS symptom, or the syndrome, the shiny object syndrome. It's sort of like you get the shiny object and you look at this thing and you go, wow. And to me, I think, I may be wrong, but I think this is basically maybe what they're doing. They aren't here to take the gold. They're not here to eat us. They're not here to do. They may just be here to make us go, wow. So I'll leave that for now. And now we'll cut this off now, and we will do some of the short questions. And again, anybody's got a question, either for Desta or for myself, can put the questions in, and we will address them. And we're going to do the tape one now. We're going to cut this one off, and we're going to do tape short ones. This has been a long one, but I've got some short questions that came in because we had 400 questions come in. We'll do in this second session maybe 15 short questions. Okay, thanks for listening.
Finished.
Please.
Yeah.